Can you hear me, Nancy?
We are live and ready to go.
Okay, we're ready to start the meeting.
Okay, then we're going to go ahead and start the meeting. So at this time, I'll go ahead and call the June 9th regular meeting of the City of Post Falls Planning and Zoning Commission to order, and we'll start with roll call.
Davis,
Here.
Whalen,
Here.
Kimball,
Here.
Stephenson,
Here.
Hampy,
Mr. Cafferty, can we just let the record show that Commissioner Hampy is indeed here and we're working through audio as we begin the meeting?
Yes, and I think the record should reflect from the roll call that we have 4 Planning and Zoning Commission members who are able to participate fully as well. And so hopefully we can bring Ms. Hampy in sometime during the process.
Okay, fantastic. Mr. Manley, do we have any amendments to this evening's agenda?
There is none.
All right. Any ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and or other presentations?
No, there's not.
Okay, that being said, commissioners, anyone here this evening need to declare conflict of any matter?
No.
Okay, hearing none, that takes us to the consent calendar. I believe we have 4 action items. Mr. Manley, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, item A is the meeting minutes from May 26, 2020. Item B is the assignment zone change, file number RZNE 3, 2020 reasoned decision. The item C is the North Place East subdivision, file number SUBD 6, 2020 reasoned decision. And item D is the North Place East PUD, file number PUD 4, 2020 reasoned decision.
Hey, commissioners, hopefully you had a chance to look over the consent calendar. At this time, I'd entertain a motion.
Chairman Davis, I would move that we accept the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Call for a vote. Amber?
Kimball,
Yes.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Whalen,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
And I do not see Hampy, just for the record.
Okay. We've got 4 commissioners, so hopefully she'll be able to join us shortly. Next item this evening is the citizen issues. Again, at this time, we ask that you submit your citizen issues written via email to amberb@postfallsidaho.org no later than 4 p.m. on the date of the meeting. Amber, do we have any citizen issues?
None.
Okay, then that takes us to item number 3, unfinished and old business. We have none, correct, Mr. Manley?
That would be correct.
Which will bring us into the main portion of this evening, which is our public hearings. Again, we have 3 public hearings to go over, 2 annexations and a housekeeping piece. So we'll go ahead and open up public hearing A, community forest annexation. Mr. Manley, you can have it from here.
So you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
So yeah, John Manley, planning manager here at the City of Post Falls, introducing community forest annexation, case file ANNX 3, 2020. City staff, we're requesting a recommendation to City Council for approval of approximately 437 acres into the City of Post Falls with a zoning request for public reserve. The public reserve zoning district, which was recently adopted, is specifically for accommodating existing and future public uses, governmental, public utility, educational, recreational, cultural, water reuse, agricultural, environmental type uses or purposes. And the PR zone does not allow privately owned development. The intent of this public reserve are for large land holdings for those uses mentioned you see here. The annexation location that's being requested is, as you see here in the red hashed box, south of the Spokane River. It's just west of Chameleon Park here, and about southwest of where City Hall is, about that location to right about over here, as you see on the screen. So the current land use is recreational with a planned land application on that. What the land application does, and Craig is available, he's with wastewater to discuss if there's any question what that means, but in essence, they take clean effluent from the wastewater facility and they treat that through a land application process on these large land holdings. Physical characteristics is large treat acreage with the Spokane River being nearby. The plan is to maintain the trees and the acreage as much as possible and create that and keep that natural beauty within that area. The water provider for this, it would be the Post Falls Water District. It's not anticipated to even be needed for this site, but if for some reason it would be needed, it would require updates to the city's water master plan. Sewer provider, if it was to be serviced, would be the city of Post Falls. So when you're looking at the zoning district and making this recommendation to City Council, we look at 6 zoning criteria. First 3 here being the most pertinent for a situation like this would be, is it consistent with the future land use map, consistent with the goals and policies found in the comprehensive plan, and in looking at considerations for traffic patterns, street classifications, existing development, future land use and community plans, and geographic natural features, looking at all this and encouraging a balance for Post Falls to remain a desirable place to be. So looking at zoning. So the black hashed area is the community forest properties. What you see just to the east, that's Chameleon Park. It's zoned R1. Purpose for that is we just recently adopted the public reserve zoning district. The methodology prior was to zone large land holdings R1, single family residentials, and parks and other community benefits would be allowed either through a special use permit or by right for like a city facility. So that methodology has been viewed as potentially not the best for large areas going forward. Hence why we had we got that public reserve zone for cases like this. And so in the staff report, you can see that the commentary in it would be that the public reserve would be complementary to the existing Chameleon Park as well as the neighborhood to the south and west of here. Looking at the future land use map, this is the current one that we have. It'll be recently updated. Here, we just adopted a new comp plan with a new future land use map. At the time of this application, was the most current. But you're looking at just to the east of this, you do see a public reserve institutional denotation just to the east, and the proposal would be compatible with that. I think another key feature is looking at community plans and future land uses. The city of Post Falls specifically purchased this with that community plan for growth, for utilizing this for the land application of the site and to augment that with the benefits of recreational uses. Here you see here is more text from the public reserve. It's applicable in all future land use designations within the comprehensive plan and on areas of at least 20 contiguous acres, which would meet those. The last 3 criteria for this is dealing with commercial and high density, limited or neighborhood commercial, lower density, and industrial zoning. So these last 3 criteria really aren't pertinent to the case in hand, therefore they're not applicable. Agencies routed in this request, as you see here. You did recently receive comments and you see that in your staff report from the Vista Utilities. That's Exhibit PA1. They had 3 concerns. I wanted to inform you that these concerns, although having merit, they are currently being discussed with city administration and with the Vista, and would more efficiently be held through separate agreements and through separate ordinance resolutions dealing with it, rather than intertwining it with the annexation, and really aren't appropriate as part of an annexation at this point. John Cafferty is available if he desires to comment this, or if you want additional commentary on this in conclusion of the staff report. So, any comments, questions, or concerns from myself, staff, or Craig Borgholz, I believe, from wastewater?
No, but John, just again to clarify, with what we're dealing with tonight is we're dealing strictly with the annexation. So it's not necessarily the land use. We are dealing with the annexation, a piece of property that has been purchased by the city that we are trying to bring in the city, correct?
Correct, and right now you're just recommending a zoning to city council. City council will make the ultimate determination on the annexation part of this.
Right.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
John, because I haven't been here for long, when was the PR zoning adopted?
It was within the last 12 months. I don't know the specific date.
Okay, thanks.
And just to make the record clear, Mr. Manley, as I read the comments and concerns from Avista as the adjoining property owner, their concerns deal more with their specific property and the security and annexation of their property, which is not on the agenda for action this evening, correct?
That is correct. And as an additional note, there are some other benefits with this being in the city of Post Falls. With the police enforcement, we get more consistent police enforcement within the city of Post Falls, and there's a lot of benefits with that, and more efficiencies having a police presence out there along the south part of the river.
So John, for clarification, right now that is monitored by the county, and if this was brought in and annexed in, it would then, in addition, be able to be monitored by Post Falls Police, correct?
That would be true.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right, Mr. Manley, anything else? So we turn it over to, I guess.
Yeah, nothing more to add, so we can move on to public if there is any.
So since we have no applicant comment, in essence, Mr. Manley had covered that piece. Amber, do we have anyone wishing to speak in favor?
None in favor, none in neutral, and we have one submittal from Scott Thorsness. I'm hoping I'm saying his last name right.
Okay.
He is not on the Zoom, but they did submit that they were opposed.
Okay, and for the record, it was basically just that, just in opposition without comment?
Correct.
Okay, duly noted. Mr. Manley, since there is no detailed offered, I'm assuming there is no need for rebuttal or continued conversation, correct?
Correct.
So that being said, I would turn the remaining time of this particular public hearing over to the commissioners to ask any final questions, thoughts, or concerns of staff. Again, we do have some individuals, Mr. Manley, you said on the call that could deal with wastewater and any other pieces. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Commissioners, any other questions?
Mr. Davis, if I might ask our wastewater expert, the wastewater is regulated as far as phosphorus content by the EPA or by whom?
Commissioners, Craig Bornpole, Utilities Manager for the City of Post Falls. Commissioner Whalen, I appreciate the question. It depends on the discharge. So right now, phosphorus in what we plan to do for land application is regulated by the state of Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. So there'll be a reuse permit. If it is discharged to surface water where we currently discharge, it is transitioning from EPA to DEQ for writing of discharge permits. So both are permitted activities, but they are different permits if it's going to surface water or land application.
Thank you, Craig.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Yeah, I have a quick question. James, do you want to go first?
You can go, Ray. That's fine.
Okay. So as with a lot of annexations, typical annexation will require utilities to be extended to the property or be available, etc. This is one of those where it's essentially being used for, I believe, parks and land application. Is there any plan to extend utilities, water and or sewer to this property?
There's no plan to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Stephenson?
That somewhat answers my question. Reading through the staff report, some of the concerns from the residents were building of houses or anything. So is there an immediate plan to do that? This is just really an annex, and this could be ultimately a park down the road. Is that kind of where we're going?
That's
yeah.
the intent, is to have this as one large land holding and not to be subdividing this up for houses. This here, the zone really wouldn't allow for privately developed housing on this. This is reserved for open space, more or less.
Okay.
Mr. Manley, what's the present use of the property?
The present use is reserved land for the land app, and the outside of that, it would be recreational uses.
Okay, good questions. Anything else? Nope, then we'll go ahead and close this public hearing out. I would be open for any comment. It sounds like we had some discussion on things, but if any commissioners want to share thoughts, and then at that point, I would entertain a motion for continue on to City Council. Any comments? Mr. Stephenson?
No, I mean, I think it makes sense. That area is, I know we go down to those parks down there, Falls Park and Chameleon Park, or however you say it, all the time. So it'd be nice to have some more area to do hiking and kind of keep that outdoors, the area that everybody likes in the city.
Commissioner Whalen?
I agree. There's some wonderful trails back there. It's very physically distanced from other folks when you're walking around. It's a great addition to Post Falls.
Mr. Kimball, anything to add, sir?
Yeah, it's one of those things where the city is kind of one of those weird situations where the city currently owns property outside of its own boundaries. And this is one of those things where by annexing it in, it gives the city the appropriate control over the property from both a zoning standpoint as well as a use standpoint, so that they can fully utilize their investment to the best benefit of the taxpayers of the city. And I think that's what this zone does. It's the appropriate zone. It's one of those zones that it's a zone essentially made specifically for properties like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's it. The PR public reserve zone is the appropriate zone, and for those reasons.
No, I absolutely completely agree. Again, to address some of those concerns, it is and has no intention for residential buildings to be taking place there. And again, it's a piece of property that currently or will continue to be monitored by EPA and DEQ. So it is not only proper use, but it is a extremely safe use of said property. So at that point, I would entertain a motion if one commissioner would like to put one forth.
Mr. Davis, I would love to make my first motion on the community forest annexation file. ANNX 0003 -2020 that we recommend it for approval to City Council with a zoning request for public reserve.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Call for a vote. Amber?
Kimball,
Yes.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Whalen,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes. All right. So moved. That moves us into the second annexation file of this evening, and that would be public hearing on land app annexation file annex ANNX 00022020. Mr. Manley, I read all those numbers for you, sir. You can have it.
So the City of Post Falls and the school district are co-applicants on this particular request, and it's for a PR zone on approximately 717 acres into the City of Post Falls. Public reserve, as stated in the previous public hearing, accommodates existing and future public uses, governmental, public utility, educational, recreational, cultural, water reuse, agricultural, environmental type uses. PR zone does not allow privately owned development. As you see here, the project location, items hatched in red, is the annexation area. Highlighted in blue, that's the area in which the school has interest in. Exhibit S4 that was within your staff report showed that there was a real estate exchange agreement done with the school for them to acquire that 70 acres. Here's where you see Jerry Keene supporting the annexation and being a part of the co-application here via email. The current land use is large egg tracts with a single residence. The City of Post Falls has been the owner of this and has managed this through egg leases for the use out there for egg purposes. The physical characteristics, there are no significant topography or vegetation matters with mentioning other than that it's been used for egg purposes. Majority of the site is served by East Green Acres. Note in the staff report, you did see that some of it is not though. Sewer would be provided by City of Post Falls if it ever needed. So here we are at the zone change criteria again, looking at the future land use map, consistent with the goals and policies in the comp plan, looking at street classifications, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, and community plans. Similar to the previous property in regards to land app, cities own this for some time, and it's been part of the long-term plans for dealing with wastewater to do land application on this site. Street classification and traffic patterns, there are no known really complications with the proposal on those matters. Zoning, you can see that to the south here, we got Crown Point, we got the technology mixed at that locations. That gives us a couple of locations of being contiguous, making it eligible for annexation. Zoning being a public reserve is a complementary to those uses as well as the county uses, providing some open space with the land application. Future land uses, the current one doesn't really necessarily identify a land use on it, but going to the proposed, you do see that this area is a transitional, and then where you see the public reserve being appropriate for all land uses, it would make this consistent with the most recent future land use map and areas within, and it is greater than 20 acres. The other item that you've seen within the staff report is it needs to be consistent with goals and policies in the comp plan, which is cited in more detail in your staff report. Just like the last one, this area is being proposed for public reserve, commercial high density, limited neighborhood commercial lower density, industrial. These aren't really applicable to the request. Agencies routed as you see here. Post Falls Police Department, they commented and remained neutral. I am gonna pull over, I believe some of you got a copy of East Green Acres. Had some concerns of this. I would like maybe Craig, if you wanted to chime in now, since you've had a chance to read this. Hopefully most of the commissioner members have read this, and Craig could probably provide some comments on this aspect of it.
Yeah, thank you, John. Again, commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Craig Vormpel, Utilities Manager for the City of Post Falls. And I want to start off by saying that we share East Green Acres concerns for aquifer protection. The City of Post Falls also draws our potable water from the Rafton Prairie Aquifer. So it is a valuable resource that we don't want to have any negative impacts to it. So as discussed in the last annexation, permitting for these types of sites is done through Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. That process is an open process with a public comment period. So once we get down the road to possibly permitting this site for land application, that'll be routed through DEQ and be able to fully address these concerns that they have at that time. I think it's separate from the annexation process where we're looking just to bring the area into the city so we can have more control, be able to enforce city code and whatnot, which is what we're looking for tonight.
Thank you, Craig. I think that's important to stress is that these pieces don't necessarily apply to the annexation, and that's what we're looking for this evening. Mr. Manley, anything else to add, sir?
No, I think that's a very distinct point that Craig pointed out, is that, you know, before any sort of use gets done, there's a separate application process that we really just are just getting zoning and annexation and creating a boundary at this time. It doesn't, we're not getting any permitted uses really at this point.
Right. Commissioners, any questions for staff at this time?
I do have maybe more of a question or comment, probably the same thing. But Mr. Manley, I wanted to bring up, it looks as if you mentioned that part of the property is within the East Green Acres Irrigation District. And it looks to me like the part that wouldn't be in the East Green Acres Irrigation District would be in Ross Point Water District. Is that correct?
See if Craig, I actually didn't research the specifics of that. Craig might be able to cite that more efficiently.
I can get back to you on that, Ray. I don't want to misquote. We can certainly look into that. I don't know that offhand. That would be my understanding of which water district it would be in on the east side of it.
I do have my GIS. I could, if you give me a second, look that up and give you that.
Okay, commissioners, while they are researching that, any other questions?
I guess probably similar would be owns some of the property here. I'm assuming they would want to use it for a school site. Is there water and sewer, or at least sewer available? Water appears to be if it's in East Green Acres, but is sewer available, or is there a route for sewer to get there?
We have identified a possible route for sewer of that area, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It connects through the Crown Point subdivision.
So what we see here is the terminus for East Green Acres does look like it's right on Syringa. To the east, Craig, you might be able to help me. How does it go when it goes to the Ross Point? Hasn't necessarily, if it's gray, does that mean they haven't necessarily annexed that area in for service at this time? What does that mean?
Yes, not annexed in, but would be within their service boundary, their planned service boundary.
Okay, so I guess a follow-on question to that would be is if there are any water rights, would then they be as typical with any annexation, would they go to that water district once they're not being used? I mean, I guess as a typical annexation request, we get, the requirement that any water rights shall be deeded to the city or the appropriate water provider. This is kind of a weird one where the city is the annex property, but it wouldn't be served by the city water system.
Yes, I think, and Mr. Cafferty might have to jump in as well. I think the city would retain those water rights as long as it is would be used for agricultural purposes, so that we would have irrigation makeup water as necessary. So with no plans to develop into residential, I think the city would retain the water rights for agricultural purposes.
Okay.
It's not so much a legal issue as kind of a factual issue. It would depend on what property is encumbered with and if the properties in question have a service agreement with the water purveyor and other specifics to any agreements that may be in place. But as a general rule, you're correct, Mr. Kimball, the city usually requires the surrendering of water rights on annexed property to include those water rights within the bundle of sticks that the city has so they can provide water throughout the city.
Commissioner Kimball?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Give you what you need. Okay. Any other questions for any staff while we're here? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close things out.
Any public?
Oh, actually, I appreciate that, Mr. Cafferty. I would not want to miss that. Amber, do we have anyone in favor wishing to speak?
None in favor. We have 3 neutral. So we have one,
Okay.
Sarah Graham. She's neutral and does not wish to speak. We have a William Bowman. He is not present. He is neutral with no comments.
Okay.
And we have a Steve Satchwell, neutral and wishes to speak.
All right, sir, if you would state your name and address, you have 4 minutes.
My name is Steve Satchwell. I am a landowner of some of the 112 acres, some of which you're wishing to annex into the city tonight. My address is 9522 Academy Hills Drive, Northeast in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Thank you, sir.
One of the questions I have is, I have 112 acres. It basically runs from Hayden back to the south and along the west side of Greens Ferry. And it runs to the south of the railroad line there. And I believe, in fact, it runs up to the current housing that's in there that's just to the north of Prairie.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, I inherited this land from my father, but so I'm a little bit questioning, but it looks like you're annexing part of my land, but not the rest of it. And as I read your map, it's basically if you extend Harmon from, I think you said it was Syringa, all the way over to Greens Ferry, it is the block, or actually, if it's Syringa back towards the houses on the south, on the north side of Prairie. And I was wondering, is the reason why you're not including that at this time?
Okay, sir, what I would say is just if you want to continue on with your comment, and then we'll make notes and we'll turn that over to staff for addressing. Is there anything else that you want to cover, sir?
I'm not opposed to what you're doing. I think I understand what the long-term plan is going to be, and I certainly would not want to stand in its way. But I'm just a little bit curious because it looks like you're annexing half my land, but not the other half, and which the other half is also there. And so you're leaving a block in there that you're not touching. Now, I understand you can't annex the railroad right of way as it goes through the land, but I have had offers of people wanting to buy me out and do some development on that. Currently, I am renting the land out as agricultural to T&T Farms, and would like to continue that. So that's my questions of why you did what you did with only what you did, and why you didn't do more than that.
All right, sir. I appreciate that. We'll finish up the public comment and circle back around. We'll have staff touch base on that. Thank you, sir. Amber, that should take care of everyone neutral. Do we have anyone wishing to speak in opposition?
We have none.
Okay. So Mr. Cafferty, Mr. Manley, Craig, anyone want to address this piece at all?
I'm going to let Mr. Manley go because he's more factually familiar with it, but I think I may have some questions for Mr. Satchwell just to make sure we're all in agreement after Mr. Manley speaks as to whether or not Mr. Satchwell's property is being annexed or not, because I'm not sure on that one.
Okay.
Chairman, just really quick.
So-
I wanted to point out that Vicky Jo has joined us, for the record.
Okay. All right. Duly noted. Thank you.
So what I show here, if you guys can see the screen, is our GIS. And we see 130 acres in the Stevens Satchwell. And you see to the north of about where at this location, you see the city of Post Falls at this line. So that's what our GIS is showing from an ownership rate point, where that break line is of what the city owns and Mr. Satchwell. We can go, I'm gonna need to turn off the purveyor layer. So you can select these, and this is also where the city of Post Falls is to the west of Mr. Satchwell, well, at this location. So I'll go back now, pull up my PowerPoint. So this right here is where that red is when we were looking at GIS. That north part is what the city of Post Falls owns, and to the west, from what I see, Mr. Satchwell has, per our GIS, about this location, 112, which is southeast, adjacent but southeast of what we're proposing to annex. Not
So
necessarily.
Adjacent, but not included in the annexation.
Correct.
And Mr. Cafferty, can we get Mr. Satchwell back up for, did you have questions for him, sir?
No, Mr. Manley clarified it for me, but I think it's good if we could get Mr. Satchwell back just to clarify, make sure we're not annexing his property as we believe we're not.
Brian, this is Seal. Just as a kind of a quick note. So the property to the north, as shown on GIS there and as shown on the annexation map, that's the piece that the school had recently purchased and traded in exchange for another piece, the piece further over to the east or the west, sorry. Just wanted to make that note.
Mr. Satchwell, are you still with us?
I'm still with you, and thank you for your clarification. I remain neutral on the action.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you, sir. So that should take care of public comment. Again, I apologize for moving too quick through that. I'm glad that we were able to get that and obviously get that cleared up. Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff before we move on? Okay. Hearing none, then we'll go ahead and close this public hearing out. Commissioner Carey, welcome. Any thoughts or comments? You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, now you're there. You're there.
Okay. I'm going to abstain from voting only because I haven't heard most of the testimony or the talk on this.
Okay. I completely understand. Commissioner Whalen, thoughts, comments?
Chairman, no, I think it was very well explained by staff, and I appreciate the response to Mr. Satchwell.
Commissioner Kimmel?
I think very similar to the last annexation request. This one is city land or school district land that is in the county. With regard to the school district, they're going to need public services, water and sewer that the city can provide. Public reserve is the absolute perfect zoning for that. It gives the public the assurance that it'll remain in public hands for civic uses, etc. And the same with the city land. It's there for land application. It's not there for developers. And I think as we've heard many times, the pushback against land development and annexations and things like that, and preserving our open spaces and preserving our prairie. This is one of those annexations that will do that exact thing. And and for that purpose, or for that reason, I think that the annexation with the public reserve zoning is the right thing to do.
Thank you, sir. The Honorable Mr. Stephenson, anything to add?
No, Ray pretty much said everything I was going to say. I'd say the comments in the staff report, everybody's concerned about the environment. I think, those are separate than this. And as long as we follow those policies and procedures with the different departments as this gets built up in the future, we'll tackle those at this time. But I think it makes sense for the annexation zone this time.
Thank you very much. I would echo all of your comments and say that, again, dealing just specifically with the annexation piece and sending it forward to City Council, that this is indeed a good fit. That being said, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll do it. I'll move to recommend approval to City Council. Land application property annexation, file name ANNX 0002 2020 with the zoning designation of PR Public Reserve.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Amber, let's call for vote.
Whalen,
Yes.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes. And again, for the record, Ms. Carey is going to abstain from this vote, which brings us to our third public hearing this evening. Item C on the agenda, which is the Idaho Street Housekeeping Ordinance Update.
Thank you, commissioners. Yes, so the Planning Division is proposing a text amendment to Title 18A TA-001-2020. And what staff's looking for is to assure that says commercial but non-residential uses be constructed along Idaho and Spokane streets. The actual code language is, as you see here, is that currently it does not state Idaho or Spokane streets. So what you see highlighted in yellow and underlined is the proposed added text within the city center planning area for the SC5 and SC6 zoning districts. This image here in purple, that's all the smart code area. That's predominantly the city center planning area. The blue area on the left side of your screen is what currently is the code is what it applies to. On the right side in the blue elliptical, that is what in the dark purple, the code language would affect. I have reached out to currently the veneer plant has been purchased by a developer of that project. I informed them of this code change, and they assured me that they were on board with that. I have that email, and that'll be part of the public record going to council pending your guys' recommendation. City center plan, as you see here on the left side of the screen, is your typical development where you have parking lots and street and you have the building set back. You see that development pattern throughout most of Post Falls, Celtice Way, Mullen Avenue, 41. What the city center plan did is it wanted to move buildings closer to the street, and there's policies in the city center plan encouraging some non-residential uses on the ground floor with potentially residential on second and third. This was reinforced with some imagery within that city center plan, as you see here. So the intent of this code change is to create those bookends of the city center, and potentially with development, they may filter down Fourth or down Third or down Railroad, depending on the market and how it develops going forward. Without it, potentially, you could end up with all multifamily with no non-residential on the ground floor. So staff is moving this forward as creating some areas within the city center planning district to create that non-residential use pattern. Agencies notified is as you see here. Do you have any questions from staff on this proposed modified language?
Commissioners?
Chairman, so John, this is a small area and it'll be new construction?
Yeah, so what you see here is really, I mean, the old language pretty much affected about, you could argue, 5 blocks that fronted, small blocks that fronted Spokane Street. Some of it already had some pre-existing development on it. And so in a lot of those developments would still be conforming, like the medical offices you see on red. Those are single story uses that are ground floor, and it's consistent with that code section. You got the Handy Mart and other commercial uses that are on Spokane Street that are all conforming with that code section. Then you have some vacant lands on the landing and other underdeveloped properties that may seek additional development. And so what this does is protect Spokane Street along this corridor from seeing multifamily butt up against Spokane Street. So that's how that affects there. And here's where you see the Idaho Street section. This currently does not extend Idaho all the way down to Third. That is what the plan is, though, is to complete Idaho Street through this area. And you see have pre-existing mill buildings at this location. So whether or not all those buildings can be reused or whether they're going to get torn down or what the plan is, we don't know what is for that veneer site. But what this code section would do would protect the city a little bit along that corridor for those lots that front Idaho to be developed with non-residential uses adjacent to Idaho Street.
Thank you.
But it's still a small portion of the city center that has this code requirement.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Again, we are in a public hearing. So Amber, do we have any in favor, neutral, or opposed that wish to speak on this matter?
We have none in favor, none in neutral, and none opposed.
Okay, then there is no need for rebuttal. Commissioners, any other questions whatsoever for staff? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close things out. Commissioner Kimball, do you wish to address this piece at all?
Sure. I guess really I just wanted to commend staff for reaching out and contacting the landowners all too often, code changes happen kind of in a vacuum away from those people that it might affect. And we're not checking agendas all the time. It can be hard to catch some of those things that might gravely affect someone's property. So great job on that, John. It's great to hear that you did that. And thank you very much. That's all I really have, other than the fact that I think it makes sense.
Commissioner Carey?
I'm just glad to see moving forward with changes in development, first try to get City Center going and get it built out down there.
Yes. Commissioner Stephenson?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same as Vicky. As that area gets developed, it'll look how we really want the long-term plan to look for that downtown area in the city center.
Commissioner Whalen, anything to add?
I agree with the other commissioners. I think Post Falls is really doing well, and it's looking good. So thank you, staff.
And I absolutely agree. And again, yes, thanks to the staff. It's nice to be able to have a strong team to come up with great ideas and keep things moving forward in the right direction. And I definitely think this is in the right direction. So without any other comment, I believe we would need a motion at this time.
I will try it. I move that we forward to the City Council for with a recommendation to approve. Let's see, the Idaho Street Housekeeping Ordinance Text Amendment TA 0001 2020. Idaho Street Housekeeping Ordinance.
I would second that.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Amber?
Kimball,
Yes.
Whalen,
Yes.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes. All right. Those three items will be moved on to City Council for consideration, which takes care of the public hearing portion this evening, and that will move us into new business. Mr. Manley, any new business to discuss this evening?
There's none.
Sir, do you have any administrative staff reports?
No real report. I do, though, want to point out that specifically in that second public hearing, I know Zoom is not always easy for everybody, and it's been an adjustment for some of us, but I think that the dynamics of that public hearing went and how it went in Zoom and being able to communicate digital information, there is some efficiency gains in that, in making a more full depth presentation at times. I've noticed that, at least by doing my presentations.
Mm-hmm. No, I would absolutely agree. Absolutely.
That's all I had.
Thank you. Commissioner comments, anything for the good of the order?
I just want to apologize to all the commissioners for coming on late. I could not find my login. I was going everywhere. Finally, I emailed and Ray looked at his email and sent me his login so I could get on. So I apologize to all of you.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Whalen, is there a high probability that in our July Planning and Zoning meeting that we will be meeting live based on recommendations from the state?
Well, tune in. The governor will be speaking Thursday at 0900 our time. So tune in, and we'll see if we move on to stage 4.
Duly noted. I think that we have learned a lot. I believe that Mr. Manley, you definitely spoke true when you spoke that there is some definite advantages of this. But I do very much look forward to seeing you all in person as we continue on. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, certainly we could be, I mean, if we can social distance and limit, I know it's different. I mean, maybe we have a hybrid. I mean, if we don't move into stage 4, not that I'm saying that we're not, because we can have up to 50. So.
Can I make a comment?
You can.
All right. So we are obviously looking at that as staff, as department heads. We continue to have those discussions as to when we'll be able to move into the public hearing type of and forums, public forums. And that is still obviously up in the air. And assuming that we are able to move into stage 4, a lot of it does end up with the governor as to what his decisions end up being, and depending upon whether or not he revokes our ability to hold these types of Zoom meetings. So those are still questions up in the air. But in order to social distance in the city council chambers, it's limited to basically, well, half of the commission can sit up front and 2 staff members, and then maybe if we're lucky, 12 people in the public. So right now it's not really feasible based on social distancing requirements, which are still applicable. And we are, we're kind of hoping for more along the lines of August, but July would be good too, obviously, but just no anticipation that July is going to be ready at this time. But fingers crossed, and we'll see how the different orders change. So
I appreciate that, and obviously, I think we've been able to showcase that we can definitely continue to get work done via Zoom, and we make no promises. That way, Mr. Cafferty and the legal team are not jittering. We've made no promises whatsoever. We simply follow the orders that have been laid out for us.
I do have one question for Mr. Steele and staff. I believe we were discussing doing some training with planning and zoning in the future. Do we have any dates to lay out for them at this time, or are we still struggling?
I don't have a date that I've heard yet, no.
I hadn't either, so I just wanted to, I was hopeful that I had missed it and that we could give something to them, but apparently not.
I'm not aware of it yet. As soon as we get that date, we will email the commission and let them know. So.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, hearing nothing else, then I would look for a motion to adjourn this evening.
Move to adjourn.
Have a wonderful evening. Be safe.
All right, thank you, Ray.
Welcome, Vicki.